Hello, noisy people, and welcome to episode number 6 of the Abrasive Noise podcast. I'm your host, Luke Parsons, and on today's show, I'm going to be talking about my top 6 albums of the year so far. So, kicking things off at number 6 is Ghost of Atlantis with 3624. This album was released on the 26th of March, and the band are from Ipswich in England, and this is their debut LP. So, Ghost of Atlantis are a symphonic metal band. They sort of contain elements of death metal, black metal, metalcore, a little bit of doom. So it's quite a blended approach they take to their music. And the thing for me that I sort of really enjoyed about this album was, obviously the music's good, but I really like the sort of mythology theme throughout the album. There's like Greek mythology and all that sort of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff I'm quite interested in. And it's a very sort of storytelling album lyrically. And it's just a really enjoyable listen. Some of the riffs are really good. The vocals are a mix of harsh and clean, and I think they sort of use that really well, use them to great effect. The vocal style is kind of like operatic. It's very sort of grand and sort of sophisticated, and it sort of juxtaposes with the harsh vocals that are sort of very menacing and kind of primitive. And yeah, just some of the melodies are really cool, sort of in a more black metal kind of style. And the symphonic elements are really cool as well. They provide a sort of cinematic feel to the music. The band tend to kind of use that quite a lot at the beginning of their songs, and they kind of change it up. It's not like they're doing the same thing on every single track. It's kind of their, it's cinematic intros most of the time, but it's kind of they do it differently. They rework it, so it doesn't feel like they're just doing the same thing over and over again, which is it's really cool. So I'm gonna talk a bit now about my favorite songs from the album. So the first one I'll start off with is "The Curse of Man," which is the fourth track, and I really like this one because it's quite, like I said before, there's a cinematic opening, and it goes into like death metal kind of sound in the verses. So it's a lot of kind of tremolo picked riffs, and like death metal vocals, and then in the chorus it's a bit more sort of, it slows down. Everything kind of slows down and it's more melodic, and just a more uplifting kind of mood. And the track kind of goes in between those two extremes throughout its runtime. And then there's a bit at the end where it's kind of, there's like a spoken word section that's quite epic and powerful, and it just feels like it almost feels like a movie in a song. It's got a lot of that kind of empowering and sort of cinematic feel to it. And yeah, it's just a really sort of empowering listen. The next track I want to talk about is Poseidon's Bow. So this is I think it's the sixth track of the album. And again, this kind of starts off cinematically. It's kind of like, feels like a movie trailer, for like a horror film or something, or a action film. And yeah, it just goes into like some really sort of chaotic death metal riffing, death metal vocals, harsh vocals. And yeah, then there's some like cool sort of background melodies going on, like it's sort of like tremolo picks. And yeah, and then sort of as you get towards the end of the track, there's like a really sort of cool chant, and it's again, it's another really powerful track. It's a very vivid track. It kind of puts you in the story really well, the story of the lyrics. Yeah, it's just a really fun track to listen to. I have a lot of fun with it. It's very, yeah, it's just very empowering. The last track I want to talk about is the last track of the album, The Lost Compass. So this one starts off a bit differently to the other two. It's got like a piano melody, which is kind of like, it's quite beautiful and sort of angelic. And then the guitars and vocals come in and just kind of like obliterates that kind of mood that it's built up, and I find that really cool. And the track as a whole is a bit more groovy compared to the rest of the album, and it's got more of a sort of metalcore influence, which is it's kind of cool. I like metalcore, so I appreciate that. And yeah, the chorus vocals are kind of like between harsh and clean a little bit. There's a bit of back and forth there, and yeah, it's a really nice way to end the album because it's kind of, it's groovy, it's fun, it's kind of got the, it's still got the symphonic elements, but it just feels like it feels like a track that was built to be an album closer. It's got that kind of finality to it because it kind of goes back to the sort of piano melody from the start, and yeah, it's just a really nice way to end the album, and it's one of my favorite tracks of it. So now I'm going to play one of these tracks for you. I decided to pick out Poseidon's Bow because it's got the most awesome name. So here we go. This is Poseidon's Bow by Ghosts of Atlantis. The next album I want to talk about is Reality Grey with Beneath This Crown. So this is their third album, which was released on the 7th of May. And yeah, it's only their third album since 2004 when they formed. So yeah, their albums are kind of hard to come by. This one's definitely worth listening to. Again, this is another band that takes kind of a blended approach to their music. I'd say their overall main core sound is, prog metal, but they've got elements of like metalcore, death metal, and it's a little bit of symphonic as well. There's a bit of electronic influence as well on some of the tracks. And yeah, again, this one's just a really fun listen. There's a lot of great riffs. There's a lot of good variation. There's variation, but it feels consistent. It's not like they're doing something that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. It all feels like it's in the scope of their sound. And yeah, just the vocals are really good. The actual guitar tone is really good. The vocals are mainly harsh vocals. There is a little bit of clean singing every now and then, but it's predominantly harsh vocals. And yeah, this is just a really strong prog metal album, and it's got a lot of plays recently for me. Maybe not really recently, but you know, the first sort of month or so after it was released, I listened to it quite a lot. Moving on to my favorite songs now of the album. So I'm gonna start off with Fade and Fear, which is the second track. So the first one after the intro. And this is just like such a good way to start an album. Like if there was a checklist for what you need on a great metal song, this one ticks all the boxes. It's like, great riffs, great guitar solo, really good meaty breakdown, which is, just really hits you hard. And a lot of great melodies as well. So it's just literally got everything that you would want in a metal track of any kind, really. And it's just one that really sticks out because I think it's literally the first proper track on the album after the intro. It sticks in your memory. The second track I want to talk about is probably my favorite track of the album. It's Daybreakers. This one starts off with a really like sort of beautiful melody, and that sort of gradually gets louder and louder before it goes into a sort of metal, death metal kind of thing. And then the chorus is just like, it's just amazing. It's got that sort of melody from the beginning, that that's used vocally rather than on the guitar, and it's yeah, it's very heavenly. It's like you feel like you're sort of up in the clouds, the way they sort of use the production to make it feel like that. And yeah, it's just a really beautiful chorus. It's quite emotional listening, and yeah, it's just that sticks out the most for me in this song. A chorus is good when it's like the first thing that you think of when you talk about the song. It's just like, yeah, that's its you know its big thing. And the last track I want to talk about is the last track of the album again. So it's called The Void, and yeah, like the Ghost of Atlantis final track, it's the same, as in it feels like it's meant to be the last track of an album. It just has that kind of, like that see you next time kind of vibe. um I think this would be really good to play last on a set, like a live gig. So I'm playing another track now from this album. So this is going to be Daybreakers from Beneath This Crown by Reality Grey. At number 4 on the list is the new Nightcrowned album called Hadenfard, which was actually released on the 2nd of July, but I still say it counts the first half of the year, just about. Nightcrowned are Swedish melodic death metal bands that have been churning out a lot of material recently. They released their debut full-length Impious Biome last year, as well as an EP called Ira, which I didn't actually listen to. And Hadenfard is pretty much just an evolution of those albums, but with better songwriting overall, I'd say. They take a blended approach to their music as well. They combine elements of melodic death metal with black metal and symphonic metal. So yeah, there's a theme emerging so far on this podcast. So Hadenfard, it's very intense and grand, which is what draws me to Nightcrowned really. Listen to their stuff it's pretty empowering. Moving on to my favourite tracks now. I'll start off with track 1, which is Nacron. What's cool about this album is that you're throwing some great stuff really early on, whereas on Impious Biome it takes a little while for it to really kick into gear. But with Nacron, the album starts off really well. So it starts off with a eerie piano melody before the track emerges into a powerful black and death metal section. And the track moves around quite a lot, so it's quite an exciting introduction to the album. The melodies they use are fantastic, which is consistent across the album. And in my opinion, the melodies they use and how they use them is the band's biggest strength. The next track I really liked was Fjatrad, which is track 3. I really liked this one because it throws you into like rapid riffs and great melodies, straight away. There's no kind of build up. You're just thrown straight into it. The intensity of this track is great. It really takes it down a notch. The riffs later on in the track are really quite punchy as well. And yeah, it's just such a powerful song, and you kind of get swept away with it, which is awesome. I think hearing this track live would be something special. The final track from Hadenfard I want to talk about is Gudars Skymning. Some really hard titles to describe in this one, but which again is another really intense track. The riffs are really fun and the choruses sound epic, and it's a really good way to kick the album back into gear after the interlude that precedes the track. It actually sounds more aggressive than it really is because of that, and it goes without saying that the melodies again brilliant. And having said all that, here is Gudars Skymning, taken from Nightcrowned's latest album, Hadenfard. So moving into the top 3 now of my favourite albums of the year so far. This is where we get to the really, really good shit. So at number 3 is Means to an End by Sunseeker. They're a melodic death metal band from America. We had Nikita from Sunseeker on the podcast last month, so after you're done here, you should definitely go check that out. So Means to an End is actually an EP rather than a full length. It's the band's debut, and it's really fucking good. The sound at the core is like melodeath, but I'd say they have a significant black metal influence as well, because the album's quite frosty and sort of that kind of aesthetic, which is what I associate with black metal, rightly or wrongly. This album has everything you'd want. It's got great riffs, great melodies, really awesome drum work, good bass tone, some really heavy breakdowns, which, you know, are really fucking awesome. The breakdowns kind of come out of nowhere. Like I didn't really expect to hear it on this album, but yeah, they're executed perfectly. They're done exactly how they should be done. As this is an EP, it's a bit weird to call out three songs that I like the most, because there's only 4 of them on there, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So the first one I want to talk about is Death of a Judge. So this is the one that's got a really powerful breakdown in it. It's one of 2 tracks that has a really good breakdown. And yeah, I mean, the rest of the track's great as well. You know, some really cool riffs and stuff, but the way they lead into the breakdown is really, really well done. Yeah, it's a very heavy breakdown as well. It's not just thrown in for the sake of it. It's there for a reason, to really make the track sort of explode into life. Yeah, it's just a really fun track to listen to. Another track I really liked was Seeking My Own Son. So again, this is another one that has a big breakdown. It's slightly different to the way it's used on Death of a Judge, but you know, it's a really powerful breakdown which works really well. I really like the melodies on this one as well. It's probably my favourite melodies of the album. They're very sort of kind of doomy a little bit, I'd say. It's very kind of end of the world kind of feeling to it. Yeah, it's just again, it's very similar to Death of a Judge, but it's done slightly differently. And the last one I want to talk about is the last track on the album, Means to an End, so the title track. And yeah, this one, it's all about the riffs, really. It's got some really good riffs in it. The vocals are great, which I kind of forgot to say about the other 2. You know, the vocals across the board are really good. It's just harsh vocals. I don't think there's any clean vocals on this album. And yeah, it's just sound very evil. Here's a track from the EP. I'm going to play Death of a Judge by Sunseeker. Enjoy.
Yes, I was looking me away.
So at number 2 is an album from one of my favourite artists of all time, and this is Blue Stahli with Obsidian. So Obsidian came out in January and is the third album of the Dead Channel trilogy. The first 2 were released in 2020, so not up for debate on this podcast, but overall the whole trilogy was pretty good. Obsidian is a consolidation of a lot of elements from the first 2 albums. It has the cinematic vibes of the second album, Copper, but the great riffs and melodies of the first album, Quartz. And I'd say overall Obsidian is the strongest album of the 3. You get a lot of great riffs, a lot of cool electronic effects, some really great memorable vocals. Blue Stahli's style is hard to nail down, but to put it simply, it's electronica infused with metal and rock. I've loved this guy for years because he was the first artist that I heard that really did this kind of music, and it's kind of stuck with me this whole time. Moving on to my top 3 tracks of the album, I'll start with Legion, which isn't really a rock or metal track, to be honest. It's basically an EDM track that is really catchy, but it's really powerful as well. There's always a lot of going on in Blue Stahli's tracks, so there's a lot of vibrancy in terms of the different electronic elements that he uses, and it's just a really kind of fun, like, dance track. I could hear it coming on in the club basically, but it's got that kind of rock and metal edge to it. So yeah, it's really cool. Another track I really liked was One Last Breath, which is a really catchy chorus, some cool riffs. It's got a kind of drum and bass kind of rhythm to it. There's a bit of an 80s vibe with the synths that are used. So yeah, it's quite an interesting track. And finally, Catastrophe is a track that I'd say breaks new ground for Blue Stahli. As I say, it's his first doom metal track. So it has that kind of crawling, lurking feeling to it, and the rhythm's quite steady and abrupt. And the main riff is kind of a textbook doom metal riff. But in my opinion, to hear it in his production style is a really cool thing. It feels different, just the way that he produces music. So having said all that, here is Catastrophe. So here we go. This is number one. My number one album so far this year is Cascadence by Archaon. So Archaon are a progressive metalcore band from the UK. Cascadence is their debut album, debut full-length album. They've released one EP before. But yeah, I've never listened to this band before, obviously this year. And this album's just like a wow album, you know, it's just so good. The vocals are what stand out for me the most. The harsh vocals are just so powerful, and it's just hard to come by vocals like that. The cleans are really good as well. Like he sounds a lot like the singer from Periphery, and again this whole album really is kind of in that kind of same vein as Periphery. But yeah, they mix it up quite a lot. So they start off with a lot of really heavy stuff, and then like the midpoint is a nice little break, and it's kind of almost like pop punk, but not really pop punk aesthetic rather than actual pop punk in substance. And yeah, just the riffs are really powerful. There's a lot of polyrhythms going on. There's a lot of cool like electronic effects that go on in the background. But yeah, for me, the standout is easily the vocals. Like, they're just so good, and it's so easy to get into these songs, even though there's a lot of polyrhythms going on. So sometimes it can kind of be a bit chaotic and a bit jagged, and you don't really know where to focus. But the vocals are that sort of pillar of the music that sort of keeps everything together. And it's just a really, really cool album that, you know, I've played so many times. And yeah, there's not really much bad to say about it at all. You can't say anything bad about it for me. It's really, really, really good. So moving on to my top 3 tracks. First one I'd start off with is Origin of Dreams, which is the track after the intro. So yeah, again, vocals are just really powerful. They're just, you know, exceptional. Both clean and harsh vocals. There's a lot of cool sort of guitar work on this one. It's sort of in the background. The breakdowns are really heavy. And yeah, it's just a really powerful introduction to the album. It just throws you straight into it, and it's one of the heaviest songs on the album for sure. Another track I really liked was Replicant. So this is just a super heavy track. Yeah, it's just very violent, very chaotic. It's definitely the heaviest track on the album, and it's quite funny because it comes before like the bit where it sort of slows down a bit. So from the start of the album to this track, it's all kind of building towards this track in terms of heaviness. And yeah, again, there's a lot of polyrhythms. It throws you about a lot. You know, you don't stay in one place for too long, and you kind of get swept away with it and pulled apart. And yeah, it's just really chaotic, really angry, really aggressive, and yeah, it's just super fun to listen to. And the final track I want to talk about is Beyond the Spire, Beneath the Canopy. So this kind of starts off with like electronic stuff going on, and then the bass sort of comes in, it sounds really cool on its own. And yeah, then it just emerges into a really sort of chaotic track. The vocals, again, I'm going to keep saying it, are really, really good. The guitar stuff is really cool as well. Again, it's like sort of djenty kind of stuff going on. So yeah, it's just a really strong track to sort of come in, because basically it comes after the kind of break, is what I'd say, with the 2 Zenith tracks, where it's sort of everything not slows down, but is not as intense. And then this track kind of picks it back up again, and I think it does it really well. So there we have it. That's my top 6 albums of the year so far. Before I go, I'm going to play one of the tracks from Archaon's album. But yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks to the bands featured on this show for making such great music. And yeah, see you next time.